gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, today it is a good day. Sorry, we have been out. I am D with your host LT, and we are the Sons of Tradition. Today, bringing you some news on March 24th of 2025. We will be running down the news that have been going on since the last time we talked to you. Sorry, we haven't been in contact with y'all. We have been doing our own thing. In other words, when I say doing our own thing, we have been struggling in the midst of the economic situation in this motherfucking country. Yeah, you already know. We are going to be running down on all the things that we have been paying attention to. In my case, listening to on NPR all the way to an obnoxious amount. And in LT's case, paying attention to the airwaves of whoever is making the most noise. LT, do you want me to go first or do you want to go first?
You can go ahead and go first.
A little background for the people. I know they staring at a black screen right now, so we're gonna go ahead and just throw something up there right now for them. I'm going ahead and putting this up for y'all. This is something that I have been reading basically in the recent airwaves, at least in the context of the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, my boy LT basically got a question and had a in-depth discussion necessarily with his peoples, and they were very they were inquiresome on the education situation in the state of Florida in the context of not only K through 12 schools but universities necessarily. It wanted us to necessarily take a dive necessarily and try to see what were some of the things that were going on necessarily when it came to schools within the state of Florida in the context of things that they might be pulling out of the classrooms. Now, in the midst of when I was looking these things up, I did my thizzle. I went on Google, typed down a little few things. Basically, the prompt was classes removed from Florida curriculum, and most of it necessarily in the context of stuff that pulls up is mostly dealing with at the college level. It seems from my perspective this isn't happening on a K through 12 level, because the amount of things that was pulling up for as reading material on the internet, as we know, was coming in the context of public and private universities, and this is a good example of one of those things in the context of the Florida State University Board. Okay, the removal of over 400 courses of general education offering after review. From my understanding, as this article states, it's in connection necessarily with what the federal government is doing, but let me go ahead and read a little bit of that for you. A comprehensive review has led to over 400 classes being stripped from the Florida State University's general education course offering from 2025-26 school year. FSU's Board of Trustees approved the removal of 432 classes during a meeting on campus Thursday from a list of 571 general education course options. It was part of a new annual review process required by Florida Board of Governors regulation. The 432 courses that were removed from the general education range from theories of African American studies, critics of religion and American multi-ethnic literature of feminism, to feminism and globalization. Sorry about that. Let me say that again. It goes from theories of African American studies, critics of religion and American multi-ethnic literature, to feminism and globalization, the evolution of human sexuality and LGBTQ history. While a significant number of courses related to the humanities and social sciences were taken out, several chemistry and mathematical classes were also removed and deemed more appropriate for juniors and seniors once they enter their given majors, according to the university. And so basically, depending on your coursework necessarily, it'll depend on what you're doing, and will depend on the thing that is being removed. And there's a few places that looked very much deeper into this, and one of them was Politico. Just gonna go ahead and run that for y'all real quick. Over here, it gives us a little in regards to the on the ground and how it looked, basically in regards to coursework. Because if you ever been to university, this is as simple as you have a certain coursework in regards to political science or your history major necessarily. There is a required coursework that they want you to take. From my understanding, the state has removed 400 classes necessary, 400 courses that are signaled necessarily to be things that are I'm guessing, required coursework for you to be doing. From what I'm also reading, some of them have also been moved to electives, but I want to show y'all a piece of writing that very much tapped into the situation on the ground, at least, and kind of sheds light on how the situation would look for the average person if they were taking classes necessarily. It goes to say here, Florida's law specifies that general education courses, the foundation for bachelor's degrees, that is made up of credits in communications, math, humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, may not quote may not distort significant historical evidence or include a curriculum that teaches identity politics, end quote. Democrats fought against the legislation, arguing, quote, politicizing higher education, end quote, and grants too much power to the University System Board of Governors, which is packed with DeSantis appointees. The state's board first action under the law was removing sociology as an option for students as a core social science course last year, replacing it with a history class. And so this is just one of the many situations basically that's going on in regards to the context of education and the removal of certain courses in the state, at least that I was able to find. Other than that, we all know technically that the state of Florida is dealing with a banned book situation where they're banning a lot of books according to what people are reading. Depending on the side that you're on will depend, at least from my examination of the whole conversation, depending on which side that you're on in this conversation, depend on how you feel. On the left side, necessarily, there's a lot of people who state that necessarily that if you do have concerns necessarily for certain books that are removed necessarily, it's good to look at those things, but not make a big heap and problem about that necessarily in the context of the current situation, the way people are doing it now, at least in their counterparts on the other side. And the people on the other side, in this case the right, necessarily is looking at books necessarily and go and sifting through books and seeing if there are books necessarily that they're not necessarily ready to talk to their children about, just in case they decide to bring them home necessarily, depending on depending on the education level necessarily, and depending on the school that this quote unquote book is in. So in regards to that, that is a quick, at least, representation necessarily for somebody who is interested in the state of Florida and the situation in regards to the removal of courses in that context. LT, you got any questions about me?
No, just remembering when I was there as a laboratory technician, and DeSantis was rolling out the documentations where all the teachers had to like sign, saying what their courses are, what are they teaching, and a lot of the STEM classes, like the STEM majors, are like, we just teach the material, like we don't put our politics into any of this. So I don't know why we're having to do this. I get social sciences having to do this, but us makes no sense. So I was just reliving a bit of my life right there when you were talking about that.
No, definitely. Technically, and and in a way, it's kind of noticeable necessarily to be at least looking at all these things basically. I was just trying to pull up something. This is one of the many resources. This is one of the many resources basically that non-governmental organizations, at least in the state and at least in the country, have created necessarily for authors necessarily and parents in regards to the context of trying to find out what books are banned. This website also has a registry or an index that you can go to see what books not only are banned, but what books are pending banning, basically, in the county in which it is in. Nonetheless, that is the education system in the state of Florida in the context of the removal of courses, at least in a better articulated way for somebody can necessarily understand. LT, you got anything to share for us?
Just wanted to share an article from Insider Higher Education talking about the same topic. Let me just this one here I actually did not read. Didn't get to it today, but it was something that was on our radar because we were both talking about the Department of Education. We got from Inside Higher Education, 5 ways education department affects higher education. Republicans long saw a goal of shuttering the educational department and got a boost this week when several media outlets reported that Trump administration was finalizing plans to executive order to wind down the agency. Um, I honestly didn't think he was going to do any of this. I was hoping that he was going to replace it with something better, but he definitely went out there and started slashing like a lot of the jobs there. In fact, one of my family members lost their job at the Department of Education.
Damn.
Well, the thing is now is media outlets like Newsmax and whatnot are now pioneering Ronald Reagan's idea to get rid of the Department of Education. Ronald Reagan was not a fan of the Department of Education, nor was he a fan of food stamps and the social system that created. He believed, I want to say, that systems like that kind of remove people from the actual equation, as in your local county school districts know what is best for your kids because you're there at that level, and the federal government coming in there and putting their hands in there kind of buries it in bureaucracy, so to speak. So while those plans devolve into department functions, most recent commentary about what the agency could go revolves around K through 12, which you were just talking about, largely ignore and shutting it down to higher education, which higher education I understand because that's like a federal thing. Like a lot of these institutions are racking up the prices to go to school, like for basic degrees. Like,
Yeah.
so I understand where they want to get a little bit of the money and the politics out of that. Honestly, I think school like that should be free technically, and then follow up with an actual internship that leads to an actual form of employment. But as you were just saying, it's not really affecting too much the K through 12. I mean, apart from like certain books and what they don't want to have there. So for me, on one side, it's like I believe in school choice. I believe that you, as the parent, knows what's best for your child. But at the same time, slashing a lot of these jobs because somebody is working a hybrid job where it's like, well, I still go in like 5 times a month. Like I teach online classes. Oh, a good example of that from my life would be when I was doing all of my drafting and my AS degree in engineering and stuff, to where a lot of those classes are night classes. Like, so the teacher has a master's in the actual field itself, but he works an actual 9 to 5, or she works a 9 to 5 job. So when they're done with their job, they come in and they teach us, to where it's like, I understand the need for flexibility like that. So just because someone's teaching a course online does not necessarily mean that they're not doing their job.
No, definitely. So, when you were talking about when you were talking about Ronald Reagan and his wanting to remove the Department of Education, I found a little nugget. Would you like to see?
Yeah, probably the video that I was just quoting.
Nah, fam. So I'm gonna let y'all see what happened when I did it. All right. So your boy was chilling, vibing, doing the thizzle. You know what I'm saying? Just chilling. Just
That's it. That's it.
Just looking up stuff. You know what I'm saying? Hold on. Wait a second. Lord of mercy.
Over here trying to.
Lord of mercy, I think I lost it.
What do you mean you lost it? I can see it right here.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I lost it on my end. Don't worry about that. Anyway, look. So, as you can see, I asked Google. I Googled that, and Google said, "Yeah, nigga." He wanted to get rid of that. And look at this shit right here. Bilingual education.
No.
Hey, hold on. Let me get my voice right. Let me get. Hold on. Let me get my voice right. Yeah, because in America, we speak nothing but English because English is the established voice of America.
Technically, we don't have a national language, which...
No, sir, we do, and I don't give a damn what you say, because in the U.S. of A., that's what we do. As I said before, sir, back-to-back World War champions. Get it right, say it in layman terms.
Okay, 1 second, because apparently my co-host came with the smoke. Came with the smoke. Go ahead.
Like I say, in the name of the Father and the Holy Spirit, and the God that George Washington was praying to on that day before he was heading into battle. We as Americans know that in this country, I'm my bad. What you call it? I'm gonna stop because my what you
Please
call
do,
it, my
because
voice.
you ain't
My
never
bad.
set
Yeah,
foot in a church anyway.
shut up, nigga. That's me. If I went to church, nigga. I can bullshit. I can pump fake, nigga. My accent was getting a little dry. You know what I'm saying? I ain't like it wasn't a little authentic.
All
But
right,
let's
fair
see.
enough.
Okay,
All
but
right.
nonetheless, let's see. While we bullshit, let's see where it takes us necessarily in the Department of. Oh, and it took us where we was going. Let's see. All right. 1979, the Office of Education had 3,000 employees and an annual budget of $12 billion. Congress appropriated the Department of Education annual budget of $14 billion, 17,000 employees, and established the Department of Education. During 1980, President's campaign, Governor calls for the total elimination of the department and severe curtailment of bilingual education and massive cutbacks in the federal role in education. Once in office, Ronald Reagan significantly reduced its budget, but in 1988, perhaps to reduce conflict with Congress, he decided to change his mind and asked for an increase from 18.4 to 20.3.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? Who said that? Reagan has increased. Oh, hold on. You see, this is my problem. I be going in the rabbit holes.
You really do. I'm just sitting here just watching.
And then it told me the New York Times. My nigga, I got that. I read. Ain't no. What's the nigga be calling that shit? Ain't no paywall for me, nigga. I'm gravy. It's good. It's delicious, like the shark off Finding Nemo. Anyway,
Hey,
all right, let's see
yo,
what it says.
pause.
The President Reagan proposes the increase for the Education Department, air traffic control system, federal crackdown. Oh, bitch, get out of my way. Get out of my way. I'm ducking, dodging, booming, I'm bucking, I'm serving up the babies. Proposal increases spending. I'm trying to find the stuff that we is looking for. Being rebuffed. He said he moved it to 20.3. However, in the slap key part of the accord, the confidential account summary. Okay, my bad. We got to read this. Okay. President Ronald Reagan proposes increase for the Department of Education, the air traffic control system, and the federal crackdown on drug trafficking and white collar crime as part of his $1.1 trillion budget for 1989, according to the confidential budget documents. The proposed increase for the Department of Education in the fiscal year 1989, which began in October 1st, represents a turnabout for the Reagan administration, whose efforts to cut the federal spending in education have repeatedly been rebuffed by Congress. For 1989, it was proposing spending $20.3 billion, up from the $18.4 billion education budget this year, according to budget documents obtained by the Associated Press. An effort to minimize conflict, the proposal includes spending $300 million additional to teach poor children and propose a tax break for families who use United States saving bonds for college tuition. In fact, the budget appeared to be drafted in an effort to minimize confrontation with Congress, although many spending levels are dictated by two levels. Okay, you know what? Yeah, that's that news in regards to that. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just gonna let y'all know what I was gonna do. I was about to look up the congressional context, if that even is a way to say that, in regards to this situation. This sounds like a situation that is after his 2 years necessarily of running, and this sounds like it's post congressional elections.
Yeah, it's remember the actual soundbite video that you had was when he was governor, not when he was actually running for president.
Oh yeah. So the proposal necessarily was, of course, when he ran, but of course afterward, once he got in office, especially heading up to general elections, he eventually had to compromise.
Or pork barrel, sure.
Pork barrel, come on. So compromising his pork barrel and not.
That was the thought by my father, man. You can't get mad at me. I had to throw it in there for the soundbite.
Wait. So when we compromise, that's pork barrel.
Hey, when we compromise, that's pork barrel.
Now, that's what he said. That's what he said.
When you go in there with a certain agenda, and then you're coming around saying, I need support for this, and then you start filling the bill with things that have nothing to do with like infrastructure. Call that pork barrel, dog.
Yeah, okay. As the new term for it is Christmas treeing the bill. But yeah, I
new term. Both those terms sound cringe, but okay.
That's the newest thing that I've heard is to Christmas tree the bill necessarily.
No, we're gonna do this like an anime. We call that filler.
Oh God. I respect that. With that being said, I'm gonna stop acting ratchet for about 2.5 seconds. Mr. LT, go ahead and tell me what else you got, good sir.
New record. Hold on a second. Let's go ahead and share the screen real quick. What we got for y'all? 'Cause, apparently we can't go a day without talking about the Orange Man. So here we are.
Hey, Orange Man back.
CNN. Trump wants a golden dome capable of defending the entire U.S. strategically. It doesn't make any sense.
Wait.
Off grid.
Wait. What?
You know the Iron Dome, right?
Oh, okay. I'm like, that's the only thing I know what this nigga talking about. So Iron Dome.
Hey, so he wants a golden dome.
Hey,
he wants it to be able to defend the entire continent because America is. The United States is kind of like a few number in countries where they actually span a vast territory. So this is what he wants.
I'm sorry, that was me trying to find liquor at the bottom of my cup. Continue.
Hey, yo, trying to find that bourbon, everybody. We don't drink that Canada whiskey over here. We drink that American bourbon.
Wait, no, I ain't gonna front. I do be drinking, and I don't drink Canadian, but I do drink that Jameson. And that Jameson done got
Jameson's Irish whiskey.
Yes, but they don't do whatchamacallit. They don't do the tariffs on that too.
Nah, not after Hugh McGregor just came down. They ain't even no.
Me, Conor McGregor.
Yeah, Conor McGregor. Hugh McGregor. Hey.
He said Conor go fix it.
Somebody's a McGregor up in the house. That's all I know.
He said Conor go fix it. My bad. Go ahead, bro. I didn't catch you off.
Officials are scrambling to develop a Golden Dome defense system that can protect the country from long-range missile strikes, and have been told by the White House that no expense will be spared in order to fulfill one of the President Donald Trump's top Pentagon priorities, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter. The Golden Dome is Trump's administration's attempt to rebrand vague plans for developing a missile defense system akin to the Israel's Iron Dome. Okay, first and foremost, CNN, you're killing me. It's not Israel's Iron Dome. We helped them invent that. Like, we have the patent for that. So it's not Israel. It's America that we gave to Israel, and it works. So now
it's the equivalent of saying Israel's Raptor. No, nigga, that's ours, nigga.
Exactly. It's like, let me get this straight, dude. We're gonna ask Israel to give us this technology back. So a lot of the issues with coming with this is the Pentagon has been ordered to allocate future budgets for 2026 to 2030. Project has no concrete plan for cost estimates exist yet. Experts predict that it could cost billions of dollars. Fine, defense and as well as technology that comes from that goes to the private sector. So I don't see an issue there. Scale of the scope. The project differs from significantly from Israel's Iron Dome, which is designed to protect small areas and short-range missiles. Covering the U.S. would require an extensive network of satellites and interceptors, which is seen immensely challenged. I don't understand that because Air Force is pretty big. Satellites, we have a bunch of those. So again, why are we throwing shade at like personal and like country defense? I don't understand CNN at this point.
I blame whoever's writing this. Something tells this is I'm not gonna lie. The way that it's reading, I don't like it, but I'm getting the gist of it. I'm understanding. It's just the presentation by whoever fuck wrote this shit is just horrible. But go ahead, continue. Zachary Cohen.
Yep, that.
Boy, you trash, boy.
Yep.
Boy, you trash, Zach. You know what I'm saying? I got a dog named Zach. Where I'm at, he write better than your shit. I'm gonna stop. Go ahead, Kevin. Go.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. The thing is that there are going to be some issues with this when it comes to intercept technology, detection system, adaptability from emerging threats, i.e., China and Russia are also working on their first forms of stealth systems. So, and when they're working on those forms of stealth systems, they're actually trying to outdo the current U.S. ones. So when people think of stealth, they think of like, oh, the old stealth fighter from the Persian Gulf, or the B-2 bomber, and the F-22 Raptor, or the F-35. Like, they're trying to surpass that. So this would be considered fourth generation stealth warfare, so to speak. So
Oh.
I can see where they're talking about, like, the emerging threats, of where you have to take that into consideration. But honestly, I don't think this is a bad idea. Like, I hate having
He's
to defend.
basically just talking about creating America's own form, but just making it stronger.
Well, yes, and I'm sure from the older viewers, the first thing when they saw that or heard that would be, oh, it's Star Wars. Reagan was against the whole Star Wars project. It's like, dude, you use satellites every day. You don't even realize it. Can we have some satellites up in there so we don't get bombed like a B-52 bomber? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Which we call it. At the yes. On the practical sense, I can definitely agree. There's a few things to take away from here. One of the things is that, and I have to. I'm talking about in the context of myself in regards to this warning. When it comes to Trump necessarily doing something that sounds weird, and weird in regards to in any context or in the context of government necessarily, it's a it's becoming more of a skill necessarily to learn how to temper yourself necessarily and look at the situation necessarily from a broad in a broad from a way of broad perspective nonetheless. And so in this context you have to take into consideration that sometimes Trump advocate from at least from what I've noticed necessarily, and also in the many examples, Trump has advocated necessarily for things that in regards to certain contract in regards to certain things in the government. In this case, in regards to the executive, he's arguing for things that are kind of already done in a way, but he wants to strengthen them. And in that principle, I can agree. I could always agree necessarily with strengthening a capability, whether it be a wartime capability or a non-wartime capability, even in regards to strengthening a government institution. I'm always up for that necessarily, all the way down to not a lot of people know, for example, there's we have somewhat of a database necessarily to go back to in regards to gun purchases, but most of them are actually recorded necessarily by are actually the records for them are still kept in in paper necessarily, and in the traditional sense, nonetheless. So I don't get caught up in my own words. There was a story that came out a while back in the New York Times or Washington Post where it talked about, unfortunately, a person working in this government institution just doing their daily rounds and putting one of the many files into one of the many slots. But due to the simple fact that this place has been holding records from all the way up to the 50s, the whole room collapsed. And so when it comes and swinging it back in the context of this conversation, I'm always for governments necessarily talking about creating stronger infrastructure or stronger plans for things that are already being done or instituted, to not just give them teeth, but to secure and necessarily their safest at the worst of times. I could always go for those things when
so
they're
you're
advocated.
advocating the whole reason why the Golden Dome needs to come into fruition is because we got to own Greenland, so we have that extra buffer to see a missile coming in. That's what you're saying.
Well, in a practical sense, when you're thinking, if I'm somebody working in the Trump administration and I'm having a hard time agreeing with him a lot of things, but also trying to create a balance where I could bring him certain good things in regards to the policy proposals that is talking about.
Yeah.
This thing is perfect because we already understand necessarily that we're kind of behind in regards to the world, in regards to the technological front and our capabilities in the realm of IT. So one thing we can not only do in regards to strengthening our strategic land infrastructure in the context of missile defense, but we could also add a layer necessarily along with that missile defense, or work in conjunction with those people who do work in missile defense to strengthen our IT capability.
I agree with that.
And so basically thinking of an iron dome that has a beautiful thin tiny layer of protection that is utilized, that could probably hack a ballistic missile 500 yards before it even gets to a cloud in the United States. I can be all for that necessarily. And from my perspective, the more that I'm hearing this, the more that I'm hearing that a little bit.
Well, it makes sense. I think in the war in Ukraine, Russia deployed a what's it called, a MERV? I think it's called a MERV. Yeah, MERV. Multiple artillery re-entry vehicles. So basically, it's imagine a warhead that's affixed to a ballistic missile. It hits some part of the atmosphere, whether it be the stratosphere, a little bit out in space or not, and then it comes back down on the target. But the warhead pops open and it releases smaller missiles. So then you can get more of an area effect, and you can use that with tactical nuclear missiles as well, or devices, so to speak. So I agree that we need to create a golden dome. I'm just kind of concerned to where we're getting into this kind of territory where we're having to make systems set up to protect from foreign ballistic missile strikes, which is kind of reminiscent of the Cold War, so to speak. Like we're having another space race, so to speak, but this time it's not in space; it's in the form of IT.
Well, yeah, and I expected as much. I expected there to be at least a race in the context of IT and the capability necessarily to, in order to utilize the code that's behind a lot of the technology that we use at our fingertips on a daily basis. That is going to be the power of the future. And many people have written about this. Many people have written about this, depending on how far back you go. And so it's just watching the Trump administration in regards to dealing with it in this context. Hey, I could agree. You know what I'm saying? Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing in this that I've seen that states that this can be a contribution in regards to, this can be something that could also strengthen IT in a way that works well. No, that's just something that I'm extrapolating in the hopes of trying to better understand the administration's motives in regards to these grand ideas that I even question whenever I hear them.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, well, I'm gonna go ahead and start off and give some people necessarily a little bit of tidbit of information. This is not kind of like an article in a way. There's a bunch of stuff necessarily that I was listening to, and hopefully we'll have a little rundown of the many things that I saw or heard necessarily in many podcasts. Nonetheless, one of the things that I saw, one of the things that riled my mind a few days ago was I was wondering where the idea of coming up with where the idea of the tariffs being utilized in a way that benefits the American system actually helps us. And and um Google as well as AI necessarily, because they're both kind of good tools when presented with the right question, prompted me necessarily to the former president William McKinley, if I'm correct. And William McKinley basically used tariffs basically and used 50% of tariffs, and U.S. Global Investors, which is a group that handles. I'm trying to find their charter right now necessarily that talks about them. Um, right now, it's an investment management firm, I'm guessing, with vast experience in global markets and specialized sectors necessarily. So I'm guessing it's a connection necessarily of investors necessarily that work in different fields and working and innovating in many things. You know how rich people do necessarily when they come together into these quote unquote conglomerates that aren't real on paper. Necessarily, they talk about the things that they eventually want to do.
Oligarchs. The oligarchs. Go ahead.
Or as some would call them, the oligarchs, necessarily, depending on what they do with their money, of course. And so, what I eventually stumbled on after Google told me, basically, that William McKinley was responsible for some tariffs way back in the day, I found something very, very, very interesting. Check this out. According to U.S. Global Investors, it says it says McKinley's tariff mishap could be a warning sign for Trump's trade war. Now, you know what, LT? I'll let you be the judge in regards to seeing if this comes from a certain perspective necessarily, in the context of trying to present this in a way that makes the other side look bad. Okay, basically, you
Okay.
could be the judge.
Okay.
All right. So let's start from the beginning. More than a century ago, then Representative William McKinley pursued an aggressive tariff strategy that sought to protect American industry and reduce reliance on foreign imports. The McKinley Tariff Act of 1980 raised import duties to an average to an average of 50%, one of the highest levels in U.S. history. The logic was simple. If foreign goods were more expensive, Americans would buy domestic products, fueling economic expansion. But the results were not so simple. Instead of strengthening America's trade position, the tariff triggered retaliation from the other nations. Prices rose, particularly for middle and lower income Americans. The political backlash followed. In the 1890 midterm elections, voters revolted. McKinley lost his seat, and Democrats took control of the House. At the time, some Republicans dreamed of annexing Canada, believing that the economic pressure would push Canadians to seek statehood. Instead, the tariff had the opposite effect. Canadian nationalists rallied against what they saw as economic coercion. The country deepened its ties with the British Empire, reinforcing the very trade barriers the U.S. sought to dispute. That's the thing that I read, necessarily. Now, like I said, this isn't something necessarily that this isn't an article necessarily that I'm expecting people to take into consideration in regards to like looking at necessarily. According to this website from the U.S. Global Investors, last time a person who was a government official necessarily tried to institute tariffs necessarily at a very, very high level for the same motivations as listed in here, of course, eventually the same thing happened necessarily with what's going on right now in the context of Canada. Necessarily, it's making Canada go back basically and rethink necessarily a lot of its economic obligations and a lot and agreements with the United States necessarily due to Donald Trump's language towards Canada and the language as well in the context of tariffs. So it also necessarily utilizes the history of the fact of Canada be trying to get Canada to be a state nonetheless. It also uses the other ironic parallel that you could use that's also attributed to our history necessarily is the the deepening of the country ties necessarily with the British Empire. In the context of this, and this one kind of the same necessarily, but you could kind of use this in the context necessarily of how we've kind of dealt with the Ukrainian situation in the current in based off the current situation in regards to Ukraine, our situation in regards to the way that we've been talking to them. Previously, of course, resulted in the European community coalescing around Ukraine and eventually trying to create their own policy to help us then and deepen their ties with Ukraine. So, based off of how you're reading this, LT, is this a credible belief that you could take into consideration without assuming that it's just presented by the other side, or is it too? How do you feel about it, nonetheless?
Uh, to answer your first question, yeah, um, it is basically showing the historical markers of where we've tried this before and it blew up in our face. Um, I've always been the person to where you use a tariff in order to get somebody at the table in order to do something. The only issue is it's like playing a game of chicken. Like, who's going to be the first one to flinch? And then if both parties don't flinch, they're going to collide with each other. So, honestly, I think Trump was trying to use the tariffs to get people to the table to like renegotiate things. But certain people are wanting to try to pull his card, which is the wrong thing to do with an individual like that because, I mean, he's wealthy. he's not going to pay for whatever mistakes that go on when it comes to the economy, like us plebs will. But that's deep. It's interesting that this is the same thing that happened before with Canada. I didn't realize that we did this with Canada
Yeah.
in the past.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that was very, very surprising of me. I was just like, "Oh wow, this is wow." So this basically made Canada like say we need to stick together. Fuck that, we're gonna go back to the British. It's like, damn.
oh wow, we're gonna run back to daddy.
It's like, oh, okay. Listen, just want to let y'all know, LT feels like that because he represent the Queen. You know what I'm saying? He went out of school out there.
You're right. I represent the Queen, not this current monarch we got right now. I ain't never liked him.
He said, "Oh God," he said, "That's the only real matriarchy I trust."
I've been boycotting British alcohol just because of that. Not my king, bro.
he's like, I don't want no kings. I want a queen.
But no, I thought this was actually really good, like very interesting. I think that tariffs are always supposed to be used as like a tool to like bring people to the table, as I already iterated earlier. I'm just concerned about how far it's going to go.
No, definitely. And
Like it's kind of sad where you got videos in Canada where they're flipping the labels of American alcohol products, and it's just like, really? Because I go to a store here and we didn't take your Crown Royal and all your other stuff off the shelf. Like, let's be civil, everybody. Let's be civil. But this also ties into a whole other thing. A lot of countries were basically using America for their social structure. Like you have Canada, United Kingdom, and a few other places where like, oh well, we don't have to pay for our military because America will take care of us, and we can just flood all that extra money from downsizing our military into the economy and the social system. Now all of a sudden, America's like, I'm taking my toys home. As people we actually see on Sky News, they're losing their mind over their United Kingdom, where it's like, oh, we got to slash benefits for pensioners and the NHS and all this stuff. And it's like, well, why do you have to slash all of this? Like, you just have to increase your military because the whole thing going on with Ukraine. This shouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, Britain used to rule the waves. What happened to you? And it's like, oh, you've been laxing on us a little bit too long. So now all of a sudden that free insurance is going to start getting a little pinched right there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in context of tariffs, I would hope that it is also used as a negotiation in in the context. Give me 1 second. Um, give me one.
I got you. So
Give me 1 second.
Go ahead, take your time. I got something for the audience anyway. China's premier says U.S. nation at an important junction during a meeting with Donald Trump's sister.
Okay.
This is basically an article that's covering the tariffs that are going on between the U.S. and China. Beijing Chinese Premier Li Qiang said Sunday that Beijing and Washington should choose dialogue instead of confrontation, as the two countries are locked in a rising friction over trade tariffs and efforts for combating illegal fentanyl trade. Li was speaking during the U.S. Senator Steve Daines, a strong supporter of Donald Trump, who is the first member of Congress to visit Beijing since Trump took office in January. The meeting was involved with the leaders of several American businesses, including FedEx Corporation, CEO of I have no idea how to say that. I apologize, my audience. Boeing CEO and Senior Vice President Brendan Nelson of Qualcomm CEO, as well as Pfizer and another CEO. So this is quite interesting because not a lot of people know a lot of our pharmaceuticals, like the basic parts that make it, do come from China. So I find that very interesting that you had like Pfizer over there who say get the jab and lock yourself in the house, and somebody ate a bat over there, which is why we had the whole sweet and sour sniffles for a year or two. But it's very interesting because when it comes to the trade tariffs, China's responding with a 15% on tariff when it comes to U.S. agricultural goods.
Oh
And
wow.
it turns out that actually China has some pretty hefty tariffs on Canada. A lot of people didn't know that, but I was looking into that and I was like, oh wow, so they tariff everybody basically.
Well, I'm guessing so. I'm guessing so, and for reasons I'm not I'm guessing there have been international correspondence or incidents between the two that have contributed to that nonetheless, and and in the context of in the context of tariffs and utilizing them as a trade tool, I assume that in a lot of times with Trump necessarily. That's so when I take tariffs necessarily, I'm thinking okay, he wants to renegotiate deals necessarily, even though you created the new NAFTA deal. So from a lot of other people's perspective, you're trying to renegotiate a deal that you wrote many years ago. But another justifiable reaction states that you can make the argument that those need to be changed based off the economic situation that is presented today in comparison to the past. Nonetheless, one of the most recent developments that's been going on in regards to the Trump administration, according to CNN, Trump says about 2 hours ago, it talked about Trump says any country buying Venezuelan oil will face a 25% tariff. According to this, said President Trump said on Monday that he will impose a 25% tariff on any nation that purchases oil from Venezuela.
Oh my god, did he just learn to shut up?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
god dang, man.
yeah, and then wonders, yeah, and then wonders why the economy is not reacting in the most jolly good way. It says quote, Venezuelans have been very hostile to the United States and freedoms which we espouse. Therefore, any country that purchases oil and gas from Venezuela will be forced to pay a tariff of 25% of the United States of any trade they do with our country, Trump said in a post on Truth Social. Now, it is fair to notice necessarily that the Venezuelan if you're noticing,
You want to share that real quick?
well, I could necessarily, I could pull that up basically, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to right now.
Okay.
One of the things, but nonetheless, it is fair to know because, if a lot of people aren't familiar, the leader of Venezuela, basically, the people that are running the country over there, according, to a lot of outside, outside observation, is ran by a pro-socialist government, and that pro-socialist government is yes, communist socialist, depending on who you want to talk to. I'm just using that term because it makes me look more objectively sound. Nonetheless, what we want, in regards to the situation there, based off how the country is, based off how the country is moving in their economic sense necessarily, and in regards to what they've been doing to get by, um, as well as with its curtailing of speech from its citizenry. It has the Western nations have condemned it on a multitude of occasions necessarily, and one side that's very very against, as we all know, or some may not know, one of the political sides in regards to America that is very much against the socialist agenda or the communist agenda basically is the right. Not to say that the left isn't necessarily, but the right is the ones who, if you didn't know who was who, you would have thought that the right was okay with enacting physical violence against that side. Um, Nonetheless, these are the people that are beef. Um, and so in this context, it is no surprise that Trump has no doesn't pull any punches in the context of using language towards Venezuela and its, we'll use that language then, communist government. Nonetheless, this seems to be another instance where tariffs are being used necessarily, and it does not look like it's used as a bargaining chip. It looks like they want the Venezuelan government necessarily to be purchasing from places that the West, the West would deem okay in their from their perspective. LT,
That's only because they nationalized a lot of their stuff. Like they're
yeah,
literally doing things that teeter on fascism and communism. So I
yes,
can
yes, 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 yes.
understand
No,
like the recoil, But at the same time, under the Biden administration, when he came out, just coming out of office, he actually increased the oil production in the U.S. And last time I checked on the news this morning, maybe Trump was talking about exporting U.S. gas and oil to other countries across the world.
Yeah, no, definitely. And
So I just find that interesting. Where it's just like, so you're gonna punish your neighbor for exporting something that they're good at exporting because you don't like them because it can undercut you a couple dollars. Okay, like,
no,
okay.
I don't think that's what it is. I just think that this is just another instance necessarily of someone necessarily who is not on the best side necessarily of the current administration. And so if anybody else is being seen purchasing from that organization, necessarily doesn't matter if you're already getting tariffed in regards to something already. It's basically like if you're already getting tariffed 50% and you go ahead and try to buy some oil from Venezuela, that's going to be another 25% tariff that's going to be on your head. I think that's what the government, and I think that's the position that the government is taking in the context of Venezuela, because in the past, and as well as currently, they have not had friendly relations with that country.
This is true.
You got anything else for the people, LT?
Nope, that was it. My little three little topics. What else you got?
All right. Now, there is one that I would like to talk about necessarily, and this one is in the context of our media outlets that the governments necessarily provide. This is Bloody Saturday, Voice of America, and other U.S. funded networks. In the context of a paper that I used to read, Radio Free Asia, if I'm correct, is also connected with Radio Free Europe, which is 100% which is 100% government subsidized. And I still do love utilizing these websites in regards to finding about the Bermuda Triangle, or not the Bermuda Triangle, but the triangle in the Eastern world in regards to Laos and Vietnam necessarily, and the situation there, and the situation specifically in Burma, as well as in North Korea, in the context of Radio Free Asia. But I'll go on to read. It says journalists showed up at the Voice of America today to broadcast their programs, only to be told that they have been locked out. Federal officials had embarked on indefinite mass suspensions. All full-time staffers at the Voice of America and Office for Cuba Broadcasting, which runs radio and television, MARTI, were affected. More than 1,000 employees. The move followed a late night edict from President Trump that its parent agency, called the U.S. Agency for Global Media, must eliminate all activities that are not required by law. In addition, under the leadership of Trump appointees, the agency has severed all contracts of the privately incorporated international broadcasters it funds, including Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia, and the Middle East Broadcasting Networks. And termination notices were granted the funded networks, two of which were reviewed by NPR, carried the signature of Trump's senior advisor, Kari Lake, whom okay,
Kari Lake,
whom he placed. Yeah. She heads the department that handles all this. She runs USAGM. When he placed at USAGM, not the agency's acting chief executive. Lake does not appear in her current job to have the statutory authority to carry out the termination. And now, to be fair, it's not to be fair. Kari Lake, basically, when she went up there and she got her position, she made it seem like this was when she went to the building that they're housed in, according to the Wall Street Journal. She tried to make it seem as if she tried to make it seem like everything was cozy. Let me see if I can pull it up actually for you. Yeah. Okay, here we go. And supposedly this is written from the person who used to run that same agency necessarily. In this article, she states that Kari Lake basically proposed Tried to make it seem, of course, I'm not signed in, so I can't go through the paywall. Um, and nonetheless, in the article, it talks about how Carrie Lake goes into the office, and Carrie Lake is just like, "Oh, this is such an extravagant office. I don't know what's going. This place is beautiful. This is nonetheless is like basically stating that there was a lot of waste in the context of how it was in an extravagant building, leather tables, perfect tiles, basically. And the person in this article, basically Amanda Bennett, basically who was somebody who worked in the administration before her, in this article in the Wall Street Journal opinion, basically just broke down why everything was like this. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna go ahead and try to root that B word basically out of my language, so at least to a considerable amount. Carrie Lake tried to present this in a way that seemed as if the government was using money in a superfluous way and not in consideration of the regular taxpayers' concerns. This person, Amanda Bennett, went on there and said, that's actually not the case. Just to run it down for people, she says the reason why there was a lot of good furniture and all that stuff is because there was a there was a pandemic that happened, and a lot of these places closed down, and a lot of them were ghost towns. So it gave us a prime example to try to replace the building that we were in, because the building we were in, we couldn't use 30% of it because it was so old, it was leaking everywhere. You would walk in, and she was giving in descriptions necessarily of certain parts where there was a water bucket specifically to collect water in a certain place that the janitor eventually empties. She talks about a certain room that she talks about how employees had to move out of offices because of mold infestations, and says that the only reason we have all these things and all this nice stuff is because the landlord after the pandemic was desperate, and they just so happened to run a big old building that was ran by a law firm, and said we could get not only the furniture but 3 years rent free.
God dang.
Yeah, that's how desperate he or she was. And eventually the government got the contract and moved to that place. But here comes Carrie Lake talking about, oh, look at all this good shit you got. Y'all must have been spending a lot of money. And Amanda Bennett had to say, no, we actually saved about $12 million, because if we weren't able to get that furniture, you would have been paying for it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, on better news, if y'all notice the top part of the thumbnail there, U.S. stock markets are doing pretty good.
Hey, they booming. I'm bugging. I'm serving another bet.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that. We're in the green right there. We're in the green.
Hey, the one thing my country good at, we trapping, so we gonna make that bread. You know what I'm saying? Japan said they might need another spawn of death. I might have to go ahead and get them boys to make me another one.
Oh, so they want the flock of destruction. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and pull up the requisition form right here.
Got you. Just want to give the people a little tidbit of information that I've learned that is crazy. Do you know what a group of crows is called?
A flock?
A murder.
Stop it.
It's what I heard. I don't even want to look it up. I feel disrespected because it's like, why you gotta be the blackbirds?
Oh, stop it.
Whole ass nigga, fuck that. I don't even want to look it up.
Almost went the whole podcast and no racial undertones, and here we go.
They started it though.
All right, well, if we're gonna roll this one, I'm gonna go on with you then. All right, so I don't have anything pulled up for it, but it is coming to my mind. Let's talk about the craziness that's going on in America when it comes to Molotov cocktail bombing of Tesla vehicles and stations. Like, what is this?
No, well, I'll say this. I'm just gonna pull something up basically, so people just not looking at some random fucking screen.
Now, let them look at the darkness. Let them look at the darkness.
So my understanding is the reason why this is going on is because,
wow, fear is driving the U.S. market.
Well, and when they say fear, a more precise word is uncertainty. Because if there's one thing that American investors, Yeah, got you. Just want to let the people know that LT is trolling right now. So if you assume that everything he's saying right now is in his heart, a little bit is.
It really is. I
You
know it's
gotta go. You have
not.
to unfortunately go in with a scalpel and find out and let him explain it to you what is and what isn't, and then nuances of that. Nonetheless, the the economic situation here in the country. My bad. I was reading something. Where were you again?
Oh, I was talking about the whole bombing of Tesla
Tesla.
dealership as
Yeah.
well as
The
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 power
the
station.
yeah. Tesla is a Tesla is in proximity. Understand that if the rules were changed and this was Bill Gates, if you are a leader and you are working with the overall United States government and you garner this much vitriol towards you, your products are going to be the first thing that is going to come that is going to be the first thing that, from at least from my perspective, that is going to be the first thing that takes damage.
Okay, so what you're saying is that if the situation was reversed, everybody be going into Best Buy and destroying the nearest laptop. Okay.
That, or they just drastically reduce their purchases or start selling them.
Okay. Fair enough.
And it's a lot of for example, this is supposedly happening in the context of Hispanics and purchasing Coca-Cola, according to a lot of posts, specifically on TikTok, at least that I've seen in my experience. So take that as you will, fandom. Um, there have been people that have stated that do for whatever reason of Trump stating in the context of Coca-Cola has fired Hispanics enough to not go and purchase those things, all the way to the point where people in that are working in those places are stating they cannot keep Pepsi on the shelf enough because the Hispanics and the Latinos are purchasing them at a high rate. So
Okay.
that's one of the ways that I'm noticing that you could do this in a way in the context of purchase. But but from my perspective, the reason why this is capable by the people and why they're able to do this is because, and think about it, what billionaire that has garnered this much vitriol towards the public that it serves?
Oh.
There isn't one. You
Uh,
know what you have to do? You would
I was
have to
gonna.
go back to the
I was gonna
newspapers
say.
of Carnegie's time.
Yeah, I want to say Rockefeller and Standard Oil.
Yeah, you would
I
have
think
to
it
go back
is back during that time
for
period, but
moments where they'd start a
that was
project
the Wild
and
West.
accidentally 1,000 people, yeah, and 1,000 people would accidentally die due to a project. Like, you'd have to go back then. But in the context of this, not really.
Not really. Okay. Okay. Okay.
And like I said, proximity is, as I like to say, proximity is a motherfucker. And depending on the context, will depend on the course of action that is taken. Proximity is a motherfucker in long distance relationships.
Shots fired.
I didn't. No, my bad, bro. My bad. I ain't mean it like that,
Shots
gang.
fired. Nah,
I
hold
didn't mean
on,
it.
Tom.
I didn't mean it like that, gang. I ain't mean it like that, bro. I'm sorry.
Just spraying, hoping to hit a target, hoping to hit paper.
I hate even mean it like that. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that's one of the many things that's going on. LT, what else we got?
I was done with all my topics. I just wanted to just talk about the whole thing with the Tesla thing because I understand protest. Like, I'm even one of the few people that's like, you want to block a highway, you can do that. Don't get mad when you get run over, though, but you can do that. That's a good form of civil unrest. But actually going and destroying property, that's where I draw the line. I'm not okay with that. It's pretty terroristic, if you ask me. This is up there with January 6th. So you have one side saying that, oh, look at what's going on here. This whole side is bad. And then y'all are doing it and then not even try to be accountable and say, yo, they need to stop doing this. Like, this is not the way to do it. You don't like a Tesla? Don't buy a Tesla.
Yeah.
Okay?
And all right, so now just want to inform the people of like a little hobby that me and LT like to do, and that's read articles from all certain perspectives, depending. And we like to read things that are articulated in a way where we go, that's a good way of putting it. I kind of agree a little bit, but I disagree a lot. But if I was living a certain way, I'd probably agree. We love reading stuff like that, and one of the many outlets that at least that I utilize in the context of reading from at least from reading from the right as well as a little bit from the left, is Real Clear Politics. Necessary is Real Clear Politics.
5 ways Dems can fight Trump and defend the Republic.
Where is that? Where is that?
That's the second line.
Oh, all right. You see, look, LT, look, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I'm talking about. Like this.
But it's from the Hill. It's from the Hill, so this is technically centered. So
Yes,
let's
yes,
roll with it.
yeah. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. Let's see what is going on. Hopefully, it doesn't hit us with ad blocks. Is it Democrats?
It's the Hill.
All right. If Democrats in Congress have a serious plan to stop Donald Trump from violating the Constitution and the nation's laws, they haven't shown it yet. Here are some suggestions. First, should stop embarrassing themselves. Okay.
From the get-go, already just insulting them. Yes,
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly. We now like this is the kind of mudslinging I kind of like. No more grandfatherly rants by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. No more sophomoric fight songs on social media, and no more. Jesus Christ, you guys could.
Yes, they're talking about it. Yes.
No more women in Congress making videos where they punch in the air as though bad kung fu mimes will stop a renegade presidency. Second, the Democrats and the Independents should tell voters in specific detail what they would do if they were given back control of the White House, House, and Senate. Trump's elections was repudiated of government as usual. Before last year's election, only 22% of Americans trusted the federal government. As the intelligencer summarized the day after the vote, quote, Trump unlikely comeback coincided ultimately entirely with an election which voters wanted change enough to ignore or embrace the dark side of his legacy and agenda, end quote. Absent a new contract with America, voters will assume the only alternative to Trumpism and do nothing Congress is unsatisfactory status quo ante. The outlines of the new contract are clear. The day before Trump's State of the Union address, the Pew Research Center reported that 72% of Americans want to reduce the role of money in politics. 67% are still worried about the affordable health care. 63% chaff at inflation, and the majority rank at the federal budget deficit. Poverty, drug addiction, and declining moral values among the nation's top problems. Gun violence and the ineptitude of the political system, illegal immigration, instability in Social Security and Medicare, violent crime, and the quality of K through 12 education also ranked high. Town halls that Democrats have begun holding, including those in or near Republican congressional districts, are good places to identify other issues that our contract with America should address. Third, Democrats should demonstrate a more responsible way to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal system. The Washington Post points out correctly that Trump and Elon Musk use, quote, overtly broad claims of fraud to build political support for sweeping cuts to programs and offices, end quote. They don't like for ideological reasons. Democrats should introduce a resolution ordering Trump to reinstate the inspector generals he fired. They should bring the Government Accountability Office before Congress to discuss better compliance with the agency's recommendation for cutting waste. GAO issued a government-wide plan last year to prevent the government from losing more than $500 billion in fraud. 3 days after Trump took office, the GAO reported that the federal agencies had implemented 463 of more than 1,800 recommendations it had made to improve government information systems. One prominent example of waste, fraud, and abuse is ironically the Department of Government Efficiency, which has been working rapid fire to emasculate the workforce programs and entire agencies authorized by Congress. Democrats should introduce legislation to withhold federal funds for Trump and his appointees, including salaries, benefits, travel, reimbursements, and other expenses until the bipartisan Congressional Budget Office certifies that the administration administers its budget Congress has directed.
Basically,
Yeah.
We're a bunch of centers. Leave the kids alone.
Well, to put it better, I agree a lot with a lot of this. Like
Yeah,
a lot. Like a
I do.
lot. Like the especially my favorite, reinstating the inspector generals and rehiring the government accountability office. Those are literally arms of the government that you could have appointed and put in there yourself and use that necessarily as Doge's referencing point in regards to government waste, but you didn't.
Sure, if you don't mind the person, whoever you're going to appoint there is going to be made the next baby of Hitler. Sure, yeah, knock yourself out.
Well, you wouldn't have to put them necessarily as a person that's the little Hitler, but you couldn't necessarily put the next person there that
The thing
understands
is
their
how the
over.
way the left would respond to it, the fly. Like
Say it again.
that's I said that's basically is how like the way the left would respond to you appointing somebody. We already saw the sling fest of all the appointees that freaking Trump put in office.
Oh yes,
Like
yes, yes, yes.
not a single one of them they even remotely liked or said anything in a positive light.
That's the thing. That's the thing. I think that if done the right way, if done the right way, the only people that who could complain are the people on the fringes. So, like, from my perspective, if you, let's say he reinstated the people that were just fired, that's better than just going out and looking for people that you eventually hired as inspector generals, because you can say, look, I hired a bunch of people from the previous administration to go back and look at the very same fraud that I quoted on a few weeks ago, and they confirmed it. So we're going ahead and removing that, basically, so we don't have to, and hopefully I won't have to deal with the crying again, because not only my administration confirmed those numbers, but the previous administration confirmed those numbers.
Oh, so we're living in a perfect world where people aren't idiots. Okay. I agree with
I
that.
would hope,
No,
I
I
would
agree.
hope
No,
so.
I wholeheartedly agree. I know that was a bit sarcastic to everybody, but like he's not wrong. I'm just saying, like, okay, so you expect the idiot to not be an idiot. Okay.
Yeah, 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 which in the case of the human experience is pretty tough.
I'm just like, okay, so we don't want them to be idiots.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly. Nonetheless, man, that is what's going on in that thing. Basically, let me just go ahead and jump back and see if there is anything else that might be crazy for us to check out. So we got Zeldin, 20 billion, one, two, just 8 NGOs, and they all pass throughs. Executive order preventing abuse of legal system in federal courts. Battle over universal injunctions. Alleged Comey honeypot sting against Trump smells
Order to not
fishy.
use the legal system and federal courts, but I mean,
Which one?
we're living in. No, I was just making a joke saying this is the day we're living into when there's not an executive order, destroy the courts and all this other stuff. Go ahead.
And that's the thing. And there's an argument that's currently happening, that's currently happening in the context of executive orders or just passing things, because it was something that every president has technically dealt with. Is how, on the surface level, from to most people can understand, it's the equivalent of the White House signing an executive order on a certain thing, or doing a certain action by the executive, and a judge in the middle of a town representing a small judicial district can eventually put a stopgap to that and make it not so. And so there's conversation necessarily in the context of, is that a system that is beneficial, or kind of is something that is a check and balance that's a little bit too strong for our system, that eventually hampers even the person with the most best intentions. That's the conversation that's going on, at least in the airwaves, when media talks about it, and whenever you hear the legal scholars get up on the screen and they have those discussions with those media pundits. But in the context of the law, especially when it comes to the immigrants necessarily, they are making good points in the context of saying, hey, you could be doing this the right way, instead of just ignoring all these injunctions necessarily, or all these orders by the legislative branch telling you, hey, you can't do that. Everybody else dealt with it, but what everybody didn't do was, everybody didn't say, well, damn you, judge, I'm going on with it anyway. And if they did, they kind of got very much in trouble for it, necessarily, in some form or fashion.
Fair point.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, D. That is LT, my co-host. We do our thing. We live life to our best. We do it because, but at the end of the day, when it comes to this politics stuff and what we be reading, at least for me, I love this shit. That's what I do. I wake up in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, I be getting up in the articles, getting mad, getting happy, getting sad, smoke a joint, but I be good. I know why, because it is provided for. It is provided for me by this great country. LT, do you want to say anything to the people?
This dude wakes up on a regular basis and bullies me. No, I'm just playing. No, have a good night, everybody.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we will talk to you on the flip side. Hopefully, when you get this video, I got to say the thing that the other YouTubers and all the other people say. Like, comment, or subscribe. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about. Please do so. Let us know, man, because right now we ain't getting the viewership like that. And if you say something, we're going to talk about that for probably the whole episode, because you are people and you have finally started talking to us like that lonely dude who ain't get talked to by no bitches. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, I'm D, that's LT. We will holler at you in the future. And again, live your life, be free out. On God.